Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone, for the intro and for welcoming me into your community meeting. I know that Hannah has mentioned that about my digital course, the AI Leadership Lab, and obviously I'd love all of you to explore that, but I really am not a salesperson. So instead of me pitching the Leadership Lab, I thought we would do a little bit of a kind of an overview on AI that hopefully will have some value or be thought-provoking for the roles that you're in. Some of it's covered in the digital course, some of it isn't. So I'll go through what's in the course at the end in case anyone on your team might be interested. But before that, Hannah and I thought it would be useful to just have a bit of a discussion about AI. I'll go through some slides. I'll try not to take too much time on slides. I don't think anybody wants a lot of slides on a Friday afternoon. So maybe 20 minutes or so, just giving an overview of what I've seen work well in terms of driving AI success from what we're going to call the non-technical roles, so outside of engineering. And then we can have a chat. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end and would always love to hear what your experiences with AI have been so far and what's top of mind. Does that sound good? When I think about AI, I often hear that, AI is going to be a silver bullet. AI can solve all of these problems. It's going to come into our organizations and change everything. But we're not seeing that. I think everyone can agree in the results. It's not just happening automatically, which can be, a bit ironic considering the automatic nature of AI. And I think personally that the reason we're getting a lot of failed attempts or false starts with AI is too much focus on the tools, the tech, the algorithms, and not enough focus on implementation, people, processes, and the real enablers of change. And I know that there's a few of you on the call whose roles are specifically around transformation. So I'm sure a lot of this will resonate and be things that you think and talk about every day. But that doesn't always mean that we join the dots back to this new tech and where the relevance is of some of the stuff that we were already doing when it comes to introducing this new technology. So a quick intro to me first. I have worked in data science, machine learning, data strategy roles for the last 13 plus years. I've split between kind of hands-on technical practitioner roles and also more on the tech adoption and strategy side. I worked in Meta for 6 years, where my team's role was to work with companies that advertised on Meta, particularly in the consumer tech and mobile app space, and help them to use data better for the decisions that they were making. And in the time that I was there, the industry went through a lot of changes, whether they were advertising regulation changes, data privacy, tech shifts. And I saw how even the most data first, sophisticated companies can struggle with change when they assume that the data or the tech or the AI will just automatically drive value without all teams, all leaders, and all individuals kind of coming together and knowing what their role is within that. Currently, I split my time between part-time product leadership roles in startups and scale-ups and AI and data advisory in larger companies. So I'll start with this. This is what I call the therapy bit of the talk. So I know a lot of people feel quite anxious about AI, and that might be for various different reasons. It might be because of all of the talk about job loss, fear of what it's going to mean for my role, my team, my company. But there can also be a more personal anxiety around it is, I don't understand this. I don't know how to add value in this. I don't know what it means for me and my career. And something that I often think about is anxiety is often associated with an intolerance of uncertainty. That trait isn't going to serve us, or that mindset or feeling isn't going to serve us when it comes to a world that is adapting at pace. And AI has really accelerated that change. It's accelerated how often we deal with different changes. So it can feel like we don't have control, and it can be hard to predict what's coming in the next years, never mind the next decades. So when I think about what's the best way that we can tackle that anxiety and make it something productive, I read something about psychological research back in the 80s that said the human trait or the mental behavior that is most opposite to anxiety is curiosity. And it is that kind of positioned as not a cure of, but a way that you can counter that feeling. So for me, that's really powerful when it comes to something like AI, where We might know what's happening, the latest update this week, but we don't know what's going to come next month or 2 months or 9 months or 2 years from now. And it can feel hard and it can feel overwhelming to stay on top of everything. So what can serve us is to really come at this and approach this with curiosity. So asking a lot of questions, just really being open, intrigued by the different developments and what they mean, and having that mindset to any change, but I think particularly in the extremity of change around AI, just position us better. So my recommendation is to be like a toddler. I don't know if anybody on the call has toddlers, or I have a niece who's 4 and a nephew who's 2, and I don't think any of their conversations do not start with questions. Everything is, but why, but why, but why, and just trying to understand everything around them. Last year, the big headline about AI was that the World Economic Forum said 32% of AI experiments fail. In the last couple of weeks, I'm sure most of you have seen the MIT headline, 95% of generative AI experiments fail. From what I've seen with my clients and from different research, things in this discipline are not making it out of pilot because the leaders are not being thoughtful enough about what those pilots are. They're not asking enough questions ahead of time about what they need to be doing, what they need to be putting in place, and really thoughtfully planning. And I think a lot of that comes from the FOMO and the fear of like, we just have to do something. Like, let's just start. If we don't start, we'll never get there. It's not that I'm saying slow down to a halt, but I think there are some techniques we can use to ask the right questions to really accelerate the impact of the decisions that we make. So whatever your role, even if you're not owning AI in your organization, I would say embrace that inner toddler and ask as many questions as possible whenever you interact with an AI project, initiative, or implementation. At the point it's proposed, just really try to step into that habit, because what I see is that the real differentiator for you and for your company is going to be asking the questions that other people don't, because there's going to be a lot of commoditization of technology. A lot of things are going to meld together. So it's going to be the context around it that is actually the strength. You probably all know that questions make us better leaders, but they also shift how we learn and how we understand. And in something as complicated as AI, that can be very powerful. So I always frame the questions around AI in this, and whenever I read it, that's why I have the picture of the toddler. I feel like it really sounds like a very curious toddler. The why, the who, the where, the how, the what, and the when. We need to be considering all angles of this. So I'm going to start with why, and if there are any Simon Sinek fans on the call, we always start with why, so it won't be too surprising. But the reason that I start with why in AI is because my fear is that most people start with AI as the why. They're getting pressure to do AI, and then they don't stop and think about, well, what's this in service of? I have seen CEOs add AI as a pillar or priority to their strategy, and it's separate and it's kept independent and it's an incremental priority. And I think that's really confusing to employees. But I also think it's the wrong way around, because you should be thinking about, what is my strategy? What are my priorities? And how can AI be an enabler of those? Because you'll really pick much better use cases and you'll really choose much better projects if you do that. So when you're faced with an AI conversation, if you can pause and think, okay, what does our company exist to do? Like the really fundamental questions. What do we need to make that happen? Or what have been the barriers we've been facing to succeed at that already? What are our existing strategic priorities? Do any of them change because of the introduction of AI? Has it disrupted anything to that level? Or how will we define success? And one of the examples I take as to why we need to do this is on that definition of success, because one of the things we see when we see there's no ROI in AI is people weren't measuring it. They did it and then after the fact said, what was the ROI of that? But they had no framework or methodology to actually assess that. But secondly, it's a lot of people equating AI with speed, efficiency gains and productivity, and saying we will do things faster or we will do more with less, but not really articulating what that means or translating what it means for their operations. So if you don't have a problem you're trying to solve, an objective that you're working towards, that you can really put AI in service of, then you will struggle to get impact out of it, but you'll definitely struggle to articulate that impact later. I saw this, I think, on LinkedIn last week or the week before, and I think we've all met these CEOs at some stage about different technologies. The biggest challenge some leaders face is actually pushing back at their superiors who are saying to the shareholders, who are saying to the board, yes, we're doing AI. I promise we're doing AI. Don't worry, we're on it. And then that trickles down as a very ambiguous directive. And they are seeing AI as the objective. They are seeing it as the end goal. We want to say that we did it because we feel that we should have done it. And what I see a lot with the people who take my course or the leaders that I coach on this is they don't feel equipped to push back on that because they don't feel, if they're not in engineering or a CTO, that they have the credibility to say AI is not the right solution to the problem. But I would argue if you confidently sit in what you know about your business, what you know about your employees, what you know about your customers, what you know about all of the problems you do have, then you are the right person to say this is or is not a good job for AI. And you just need to find the resources or supports to get to that level of confidence that you feel like you can articulate the pushback that is necessary to redirect AI into the right part of the business. I went to a lot of conferences and events last year, and one of the last ones I went to was Web Summit in Lisbon. And there was a lot of talk about AI. There was an AI stage, even the non-AI stages were very sprinkled with AI and a lot of kind of superlatives and platitudes about how it was going to change the world. I remember there was one talk from, I think it was the CEO of Superhuman. I don't know if anybody here uses that email attachment. Do you use Superhuman? No, it's, you know, it is good for what it is, but my constant thing is, isn't Gmail just going to build those add-ons and ultimately use its own AI to do that? But it's, email automation. We will clean up your inbox. We will tell you what emails are a priority. We will flag, redirect X, Y, and Z. And the CEO asked the audience, if somebody could tell you which emails were a priority and summarize them, would you want that? And everyone in the room put their hand up. Of course they did. None of us want to spend time fishing through emails. And then he said, if somebody could, draft responses to all of your emails and take that next step out, start to do the responding, would you want that? And I think about 50% of the room said, yeah, I'd like a bit of help with drafting and composing and, starting that process. And then he said, and if your email server could respond to the emails without needing to involve you and could schedule meetings out of your emails, would you want that? And 0 people said that they would want that. And I could see, back to the word, anxiety in the room at the thought of a machine scheduling meetings without you having any oversight on that. And he was bullish that anything we can do with AI, we should do. And it was in that moment and after I reflected on the event, I was like, I just can't go along with that. Just because we can do it with AI is not a good enough reason to do something with AI. One of the speakers who opened Web Summit was Max Tegmark, who wrote a book in 2017 called Life 3.0. And the reason he wrote that book was he wanted more people from outside tech and outside AI research to get involved in the existential debate of where AI was going. And in it, he predicted that the first jobs that would be replaced by AI were the really dangerous ones, the really boring ones, kind of manual labor, high risk. But as we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years, AI came for art and writing and all of those things that some of which we might have said we didn't want to give away. Because the AI trend is driven by capabilities, not demand. And that's where a lot of people kind of say, that's not my job. I don't have a voice in that. I don't have power to change that. But the more people that say that in a business, the less we will direct and control where AI goes. So if we go back to what we're trying to achieve and say, what can AI do to help us with this? Instead of starting with AI and saying, what can AI do? We can at least get to outcomes that we want.
Kate, can I build on that? Because I think I
Yeah.
just, you know what, it's really bizarre because I've written a post on LinkedIn this morning and it basically said pretty much the same thing as what you've just talked about for the last 10, 15 minutes. But I think the other thing I think that I see a lot of when TCS does a lot of stuff in the AI space is not enough organizations are thinking about, first of all, where they create value for their customers and also where their customers perceive they create value for them.
Yeah.
And what I think I think you touched on it earlier on, which is this whole piece around, I think there's a massive challenge coming down the track for CEOs and C-suites who basically think they're doing all this wonderful thing with AI. And I couldn't agree with you more about, this hype cycle around, we go to boards and see all these people. And the first question is, what can we do with AI? But actually, the fundamental question is, what's your problem statement? And secondly, where do you add value and where do your customers perceive you add value? Because if you spend your time automating all of that, you're going to commoditize your proposition and you're going to end up in a space where nobody sees that you have unique value in the marketplace and somebody will just take over your position.
I couldn't agree more. I was giving a workshop to a group of product directors last week in a large multinational, and one of the exercises I had them do before we spoke about AI was, what do you think is special about your teams? Like, what is it that you hire for to date? Like, not in a post AI world, but what were the things you looked for that you believed were important enough to differentiate you against your competition? Because if you very quickly either give those jobs to AI or replace the work that will help your junior staff learn to do those things well, you're going to dilute what's special about you. And I think that in an AI context, what a lot of people don't pause to think about is there's going to be a lot of mediocrity comes out of AI by design because it's learning from patterns. That's what it's optimizing towards the same. And what we didn't have, say, 5 years ago in AI, but we really do have now, is a very small number of big companies that can afford to train these huge large language foundational models. So the majority of everybody else are going to use their tech, which means the AI itself is not the differentiator. It's what you do with the AI is going to be what's different. And that context doesn't come from engineering. That context comes from, what do I know about my customers? What do I know about why they chose me over my competition to begin with? What do I know about my employees? What do we do differently? And back to that question I had on the kind of the North Star slide, is any of that disrupted? Because what you want to do with AI is actually free up more time to do those things and, to elevate those things. But if you start to give them away or to etch away your advantage, I think we're going to have a lot of companies that look back and go, why was I pulled along by an AI tool that I didn't really know where it should sit? Which brings us on to question two, which is, what do we do with AI? So once you have your why, you can hopefully kind of funnel in on a few places AI might be useful. I see this coming from three places actually. One is top down, if a leadership says productivity and cost cutting. So it's a blanket statement of, we want to cut costs. They don't say how, they don't say where, they just let you figure it out. Bottom up, where you have employees say, I use this tool for this job and I think it's great and everybody should do the same. Or the third and potentially the most common is external noise. This tool is popular. Somebody else said that they benefited from this. Now I need to do that too. As leaders, your job is to take in all of that information, but add it to the context of the organization, add it to the systems, the teams, the operations, the different things to say, okay, I believe there is big value in terms of either automating or augmenting this workflow or process. But the next question, a question people outside of data don't love asking, is do we have the data to build upon? Like, where are we starting? If we think about AI as ChatGPT, yes, you can introduce ChatGPT into your organization with very little pre-work. There should still be some governance and some thought about it, but you are kind of dropping it in out of the box. Let's just go. But if you're more ambitious about how embedded AI should be in your organization, if you're thinking about disrupting your product with AI or updating how your teams work with AI, then chances are you want something that is built for your business. And if you do, you are going to need to have the data in the right place, in the right quality to do that. The last thing that you need to consider in choosing your what is you might look at an end-to-end process like your call center interacting on certain conversation types or internal team handovers and documentation. Just because that is the problem you need to solve does not mean AI has to take the whole thing. It might be fit for a part of it, and another part might be too high risk. So always be that voice that takes the step out and says, okay, is all of this at the same risk and impact level? Is there one part that this makes the most sense for? And be able to think in those systems of risks and dependencies that maybe individual members of your team cannot see. I think it can be useful to ground in a definition of AI because I think there are so many definitions of AI out there. And when we start to talk about what is our definition of AI, that's where some of the overwhelm and anxiety can come in for business or customer or transformation teams where they're like, that belongs to tech, that belongs to engineering. I don't think anybody needs to have a PhD to be able to engage in these discussions. What you do need is to get to a conceptual understanding that you're comfortable with, that you feel like, yeah, I'm going to be able to spot the difference between this and that. AI is not automation. Automation is let's just rinse and repeat. AI is intelligent automation. AI is not all machine learning. It is machine learning that is happening at a certain kind of scale or, So here's the definition that I work with. Artificial intelligence is the field of developing computer systems for tasks that we typically associate with human intelligence, but specifically, modern AI includes those systems and software that learn from data. It identifies patterns, it makes predictions, it generates contents, and it interacts through language. So once we're grounded in a definition that we're comfortable with, and we don't need to know about code or statistics or the specifics of the machine learning, but we say like, that's the job it does, then we are best placed to look at the workflows in and around our team and say, is there some of that work we think we could actually benefit from handing over to or enriching with AI? The third set of questions that I jump into is the who. I usually put people at the top, but I feel like having established your why and your what in AI helps to kind of focus it and understand what are we talking about. But we can't go any further without talking about people. When I think about the process of an AI development, assuming we're building it in-house or at least deeply integrating a custom build in-house, I would say people are involved in at least 6 touch points with AI. But very rarely do deployments consider all 6 when they put together a plan. The first is data. We in Europe have been talking about data privacy and user data for a long time, so this is not one that is unfamiliar to us. But when we think about AI, we should think about who collected the data and who gave us the data. That gets bigger in the LLM or generative AI context because now we're talking about writers, authors, artists. We're talking about a lot of different data types that we maybe weren't talking about before. But we want to consider that person both for permissions, which is obviously what things like GDPR deal with, but also for what are you using it for? How are you using it? And is that appropriate for how the data was collected? The second group that are involved are the people developing the AI. So these are our friends in engineering, machine learning, data science. We want to meet them in a way where we both feel like we're working towards the same objectives, where if they're designing something, we're able to voice to them from the business and customer perspective what's important to know when they're building. We want to understand each other's KPIs, each other's incentives, each other's roadblocks in a shared language so that the AI that they build and roll out represents what's important to our side of the business. The next stage, and I've spoken a little bit about workflow, so you'll realize it comes up a lot in AI. Who previously did the job that you're now asking AI to do, and who will interact with the new process? talk a lot about job replacement and job augmentation, we need to kind of think through a couple of steps because often it's just somebody is moved down a process in the workflow. But if they have to interact with AI, that can create a whole new set of tasks and a whole new set of skills required. The next is the end user. A lot of people on this call work directly with customers in terms of what their team's output is. Customer facing AI is higher risk than internal facing AI because you're dealing with a scale where if you have uncertainty or unpredictability in outputs, it can be harder to monitor them than if you were using employees to kind of do that work. We have to think about the end user. And back to your point, Tim, does this change how they perceive us if our value has now shifted in terms of what they're getting? And finally, indirect impact, so downstream impact. If our customer has a customer, or if there is a societal impact of something that we're creating, I'm not saying each of these points is equally weighted in every AI use case or implementation, but if you at least pause to consider all of these, you will spot a lot of risks that you may not if you don't think about them this way. When we're driving AI adoption with our teams, and this might be as simple as usage of Copilot or ChatGPT or some other tool that you've implemented, there's two questions that consciously or subconsciously are top of mind for the people on our team. One is what's in it for me, and we always come back to this with change and transformation is what's in it for me? What do I benefit from doing this? But the other one that I see just as frequently with AI is, but what does this actually mean for me? And that can mean on a daily basis, is my job different? Are the expectations of me different? In early implementations, that might be easy to track and predict. As implementations get more complicated, you may rework whole systems around agents or completely overhaul processes. So it might be harder to say, but if you include the people in the conversation, you will at least spot what might or should be different. Again, when I talk to the transformation experts, I'm sure nothing here is new, but when we talk about tech adoption, remember that people do adopt tech or they don't adopt tech. Your frontline staff will be the ones that make or break the efforts of the AI if you try to roll it out. If they don't understand what you want them to do with it or why, they won't adopt them properly. It's best to meet them where they are. I often find that the people who choose to go to AI courses or read AI documents think they represent the rest of their team and their staff. But the simple act of seeking out information on this means that you are more interested than the average person. So if you assume everybody on your team is as excited, as enthusiastic, as knowledgeable about AI, you're not building for the general, you're building for the early adopters. So listening to people and getting a really good understanding, whether it's generational differences, function differences, or individual differences of what are they thinking about? Because for some, it will be the kind of the fear we think it is, the what about my job? But for others, it won't. I've heard of people saying, I didn't want to tell anyone I was using AI because I was getting an advantage out of it and how much work I was getting done in a day, and I didn't want to be penalized for that. It can be things that you don't always anticipate. The last thing I'd say with particularly with tech like this is people don't always use it the way we expect they would. When we leave the room, people's behaviors, their own agendas, their own inclinations, their own biases can come into play. So the more clarity we have and the more feedback we get, the further we can get with this. And we go on to when. Back to our CEO meme or drawing or comic book earlier. Most CEOs want it yesterday or as soon as possible. We as leaders want to shift the conversation from when can we build something in AI to when will we be able to build or implement AI that is the best solution for our problem. In a lot of build conversations, you should not start with AI. You should start with something less unpredictable, something that relies on less data, something that will get you 80% of the way there, but be simpler to build. So starting to talk about readiness will endear you to your technology counterparts, because they want you to come to them and say, how far away from this are we and what are the first steps we could take? They do not want more people banging on their door and saying, can I have this yesterday? So starting those conversations about what is our real readiness, and readiness can mean data, infrastructure, people, financial, like there's a lot of components to readiness. But really asking those questions means all of the team kind of come together in a more strategic way. And then last of our 5 Ws, or whatever we want to call it, of toddler AI, what needs to change as a result of our rollout? This is the where and the how. So we've chosen what we're going to do. We've chosen when we're going to do it. We know why we're doing it. We've got our team involved. We know who it impacts. What's happening all around that will impact the project? So what risks are introduced? What other technologies or dependencies might exist? What employee expectations or incentives need to change? And back to your point, Tim, does this actually now impact your core offering? I spoke to somebody who had spent 6 months developing machine learning specific for their business. And 2 days after they launched, OpenAI released something better that everybody could use. And all of their competitors were able to just plug it in. You need to start thinking about it in terms of the speed of delivery might raise the floor on what great looks like in technology, but you can really tackle that from all of the stuff that surrounds it. I always take a minute to talk about KPIs and metrics. They're not very fun, but I have seen so many tech transformation and tech adoption projects fail on them. They are, in a way, how we police or enforce strategic shifts. I worked with a company who spent 500,000 implementing a new data infrastructure model and technology for marketing. 200K on a senior change management leader, and then 300K on the actual tech. They ended up killing the project after 12 months. And every time we asked, how's it going? Are you using the new data? Are you using the new model? The answer was no, because the marketing team's KPIs had never been updated to it. They were still relying on the previous version of data. Small things like this can destroy change if you don't think about how you are silently signaling what you want people to do and not do. But we also need to realize that metrics have limitations. I think it takes about 2 degrees of separation to move from what we want to achieve to when we turn it into a KPI, and then we turn it into something that we can actually measure. And then our team decide to game that KPI, and we're miles away from what we started with. So you have to be realistic about the limitations of metrics as well, because they are a distortion of what you're trying to do, but they can have a lot more power than sometimes we would like them to have. We need to always ask with AI, what was the goal? Are we getting closer to it? If not, why not? So just to wrap up, obviously I'll talk to you about the course in a few minutes, but I think it'd be great to take a few minutes to chat about this before we do that. I think every business leader should have a question pack for themselves that turns their organizational context into almost a checklist of, before somebody comes to me with an AI idea, how will I know if it's actually beneficial for this moment in time? There's a lot of benefit in going with the flow of what your team are doing. Yes, we will sometimes need to push against it, but if we don't, we shouldn't, because we can get a lot of wins out of what they're choosing to do already and the projects they were already working on. And the last thing is, there is a lot of benefit in taking a people first approach to AI, because like I say, as the technology gets more powerful and more the same, it is the context around it, which is often coming from the people, that will make it more successful. So does anybody have any questions on any of that? Anything you want to share from your own experiences with AI, where you're at with it, or what's top of mind? Owen, love to hear the Irish accent again.
I am enjoying listening to that. I did laugh at your example on the machine learning that went out of date after kind of 2 days, because it just reminded me of a conversation we were having last week, and I just love your perspective on it. If you think of, like, there's a typical customer service example that I'm sure a lot of people are talking about at the minute, in terms of, chat bots, LLMs, all the rest of it, and how, I as a customer are going to interact with those, will it work? What's the best way to do it? What are the right use cases? But I suppose, what's your guidance on kind of how you think beyond that? Because I suppose what we were kind of talking about is, at some point, I'm probably not going to have that conversation. I'm going to, my Alexa or whatever it will be the one who has that conversation with another machine. So I'd just be interested on your thoughts, on how much effort do you put into dealing with what we're kind of looking at now, and almost try and, figure out, well, where's that going to be in, 12, 18, 24 months time?
Yeah. I think the weight of the effort for most businesses needs to go into the now and the short term, because we survive because we get that right. People can sometimes be like, pie in the sky, where is this going? And I would say 10, 15% of your time on that is worthwhile. But I think the vast majority is on the now. But I would say to try to combine the two in terms of how you think about things. I said the word workflow a lot because really good AI product management and AI design is about workflows rather than tasks. And this is why agents are becoming as popular as they are, because they don't step into one part of the task or try to replicate the full process. They try to redesign it in a way that's just better overall. So I think trying to think about what can we learn about the workflow today that will make us build something better in future. So not be kind of autopiloting our way through what is a priority today, but really trying to take in the insight from our customers that will make us build something better. Because I think two things are likely to become trends, particularly in that chatbot customer service space. One is it's going to shift to small language models in a lot of cases from large language models, because we don't want the risk of all of the extra hallucinations and context. And the technology that allows us to get more insight out of less data is going to improve. So I think we'll go through this trend that will be, large language models, everybody bring them in, everybody feel the pain of them saying something weird to a customer. Then the large language models will be put to the side. Small language models tech will improve so that smaller data can do more. And I think it'll kind of go through that flow, but we will learn more about model evaluation by staying close to the customer experience. And model evaluation is the bit that has the most to gain right now, not model development, but model evaluation. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is we're probably going to get to a point where people pay a premium for not interacting with AI. And that's the bit that the tech leaders don't want you to think about, is that actually, like, I'm sure it's definitely true in Ireland, Owen, but I'm sure it's true in the UK as well. We love the bought local, bought in Ireland, made in Ireland. We pay a premium for what's rare. And I think that's probably where customer service is going to end up, is people will be trying to get to the human interaction, just like they have done with the more generic chatbots over time. There will be certain situations where they want that. So I think what we can do in the short term is, use out of the box, use things that we can buy in as much as possible, not invest huge amounts of time and effort internally in trying to build better than what's out there now, because we won't. Whatever we bring in from external is probably best in class at this stage of the tech development. But use our customer interactions that are continuing, and use what we know about the workflow to design what ideal would look like. And then we'll know, is it going to be an evaluation data set that we have that nobody else has that's going to set us apart? Do we start building that data set now, which would likely be the labeling of the customer interactions that are a bit funny for our business? And at what stage do we think an agent or a small language model can actually come in and make a difference? But I would put a huge amount of value on the interim experiences.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else? Jackie?
Kate, that was great. You just really put that across in such an understandable and gettable way. So congratulations to you for that. That was really, really good. I was taken, of course, by your people first approach to AI. And I just wondered whether you, or indeed any other colleagues on the call, have got any good or learning experiences to share about how you've practically taken people on the journey in a positive way, and particularly in the areas that most of us are responsible for. Our teams will feel quite under threat about what AI might mean to them. So I think we all know the theory, and who's kind of done it and got a
Yeah.
good example to share, or something they're really catastrophically happy to share if we can learn from it?
I'll share one example, maybe give people time to think of their own, because I'd love to hear from others on the call. There's a utility company that I worked with, and I was blown away by the simplicity of what they did, but how effective it was. To choose the use cases that they started with, they went to their employee satisfaction survey and they looked at them from the last 2 years. And what they pulled out of the employee satisfaction survey from, say, 2 years ago was things we wish we could do, but we can't. All of us have submitted an employee satisfaction survey and watched as leadership say, yeah, we know, but, and we can't do it. We are now in a moment where there are tools that can help with those administrative pain points that take a lot of time out of our days. So when I worked in Meta, one of the questions everybody loved the most was, and not loved because it was a high result, but loved because it was very conversation starting. How much of your time do you spend doing the work you enjoy? Now, as Irish and English people, I'm sure we'll all be aligned that the meta definition that if it was less than 80% you hated your job was a little bit chaotic. But still it did bring good conversations about, okay, well, where is all of your time being spent? So you might have gold in the employee satisfaction surveys, and not just the most recent one, but going back a little bit. What that utility company did was they did a hackathon with that data. So they brought a couple of teams in together for a full day session, brought the specific use cases that they had extracted or problems they'd extracted, and said, let's solve one or two of these together today, and then we'll go off and get the permissions for the tools and X, Y, and Z. So the people in the room were like, oh, this is to help me. The employees were bought in immediately because they felt like they were listened to, but they also felt involved in the solution. A lot of the pain points I hear from employees end up being around approvals to use tools and the paperwork and stuff like that. So I would say, as business leaders, before you do something like that, make sure that you know the answers to, well, what will we be able to use and not use? Because you might find that people are using preferred tools. But I thought that was a brilliant example that really cut through to it's employee first by design. Anybody else have anything that they did that the employees liked?
Yeah, I can bring something in. So we a little while ago, we did an AI hackathon, and we purely gave our team members the brief of just create some value, but kind of at your desk. Don't try and think of the big things that are big shiny AI things that are going to try and catch people's eye, but actually just go away, work with the tools that we've got, and see how you can make your kind of individual working life more productive and better using AI. And there were some really, really good examples that came out, just because we gave people the platform and permission to use AI to, in the nicest way and in the proper way, shortcut the amount of work you need to do to get to the same result you were getting to before. Not come up with brand new, big, shiny results, but actually get the same result, just do it a bit differently using AI. There's some really good examples, and people they really got behind it.
Nice. Hackathons can be great. Challenges are great as well. Like you set them off and go, come back to us on such and such a date, and the winner gets X, Y, and Z. I remember when I started using Superhuman, it was funny because the friend of mine who gave me free access said he saved like 6 hours a week on his emails using this tool. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Within a couple of weeks, I had saved 0 minutes. And I realized it was for two reasons. One, I didn't have a problem with emails to begin with, so I didn't have that much time to gain. But the second is I didn't put any time into going into the tool, figuring out like what's great about this, what are the ways I could kind of make it work for me. So I think what's really nice about James's example is it comes from real individual problems. Instead of somebody at director or VP level walking in and telling the team the problem they have. And I think that often that is more powerful because you're kind of going, individuals work differently and they can often be afraid to put their hand up and go, I'm spending all my time in emails. Like nobody wants to say that to their leadership, but giving them the constraints to share safely and be like, I had a big win and have it seen as a big win can get beyond that quickly. Cool. Anyone else have a question? No? Perfect. So I will show you the course. I will do the awkward sales bit at the end, because we have to. Part of this actually addresses the point you just asked, Jackie. So there may be value, whether it's for you or somebody else in your team. So the course is called the AI Leadership Lab. It is directed at the business leaders that don't come from engineering, that don't come from data science, that want to, lead this strategically more effectively. It's a digital self-paced course. I think it takes less than 3 hours total, Hannah, but does come with some downloadable resources as well that you can use again and again. I'm going to add a couple of more resources to it next week as well. Don't worry, Hannah, you'll get those as well, even though you've already finished the course. And this is the way that it's laid out. So the first 2 modules I kind of describe as the understanding part of the course. What's different about AI from all of those other digital transformations before, and what's the same that we need to think about in an AI context. Then where do you start? A deeper dive into how to pick that first project. What is the right kind of first step we should take? Back to Jackie's question, how do you get your team involved? Because I really do think it's the make or break in a lot of cases for these things. And then lastly, how do you assess and talk about success at the end? Like, what does success mean in the context of AI? And how can you shout from the rooftops the successes that you've had? So that is the course. It is broken into 15 videos of 5 to 10 minutes, because I did not think there was any business leaders out there that wanted to sit down all in one burst and do it. But I think that's how you did it, Anna. You're like, I'm going to sit down and watch the whole thing. So that is your choice. That is your prerogative if you do it. But the link is there, and I know Hannah has a discount code. If anybody on your teams you think could benefit from this kind of a course, then it is out there. Yeah. So that is me.
Thank you, Kate. That was brilliant. And there's plenty of benefits of the course, but my overview and from my personal experience with it is, personally, I don't want to get left behind here with the whole AI piece. And so by going through the course, it really kind of gets you thinking about AI in practice, rather than, oh, it's there and it's coming and I'm a bit unsure about what to do. It really gets you thinking differently. A lot kind of do much more deeper research. So one of your resources, I actually type that into ChatGPT every Friday afternoon to get updates on AI on recruitment, and I'll do it for other industries as well. That there are a few really valuable tools just to encourage you to think a bit more, like, as I say, more deeply around AI, which then translates into how are you putting it in practice. So I mean that's my kind of top level overview on it. I mean I don't know if anybody else has any more questions on the course, or AI in practice, or anything like that. It's not usual for you guys to be quiet, is it? Let's face it.
And all I'd say is, AI is a tool, and if you see it as an outcome, you've got your head around the wrong way. Really, it's not where it's at. It's a tool. It's a bit like agile and all the other things we've seen in all of our careers. Too many organizations are seeing it as an outcome, and that's the problem that Kate talked about earlier on, which is you're in the C-suite and you have a conversation, and the first question is, how can we use AI, not what's our problem, what are we trying to achieve, where's the value driven for both our customers and our people, and our proposition. And if you think about it in that way and don't get caught in the hype cycle, then you're not too far wrong, I don't think. If you get caught in the hype cycle, your first question is, right, we've got to use it, I've got to get up to date, I've got to know everything about it. You don't. You honestly don't.
And it would be a full-time job and then some to know everything about it. Like, there's a new update every half day, I think, at this stage. And what I find really interesting is people are constantly reading the latest update from the latest tool, and then you go into their organization and they're actually only allowed to use Copilot because of their AI policy. And that workshop I did last week, I was like, okay, cool. And so what do you use Copilot for? We don't. And have your teams done any training on what's possible in Copilot? No. why are you paying me to come in and talk about AI when you haven't even looked at the tool that all of you have access to? So I think there is that overwhelm leads to inaction, because it's like, well, if I can't do everything, then I don't know where to start. And I think that we need to start with reality, which is, okay, well, where are we and what are we already focused on? Louise?
Yeah, I was also going to add to all of that, actually. I work in a fairly AI intensive organization. But I think it's really important to remember that when the AI Act hopefully gets finalised in 2026, that half the things that people are using AI for today may actually need to be undone, reframed, repositioned, revalidated, all those kind of rewords that probably go through a dictionary, just to make sure that they are actually complying with that act. So I don't know whether that act will change shape by the time it gets to 2026, or whether we do what we think we're doing now until we get told not to do something another way. Because I think that's the only thing that I am very mindful of as we go on these journeys, of knowing that we might need to go backwards again before we go forwards. But until that is actually framed properly, then I don't think we have many other alternatives other than what you've been talking around, Kate, to say, actually, this is what we think we should be doing, allowing for, privacy rules and everything else we've got going on in the world. So it's a really interesting journey. And I don't think, what I'm seeing is some people, because of this pending act, are doing nothing at all. And I'm not sure that is the way forward either. So I think it's better to try something and then unravel it if it doesn't conform than not even try using I'm just thinking about your Copilot example, right? It's like, well, try it and then work out whether we need to change it. So it's a really interesting journey I think we're currently on.
It really is. And like, the two things I would say about the AI Act or any other regulation that comes after, because there'll be more that are industry specific and wherever your customers are based, is you understand by doing. Like, we talk about learning AI, but we really need to grapple with understanding what's happening under the hood. And if we wait, we won't be the most equipped people to plan for the EU AI Act, because there's going to be a lot around the outcomes, the transparency, all of those things that really only by going through trial and error will we be equipped to say, okay, well, I don't trust this. This isn't good enough, or whatever it might be. The people that I speak to most on AI governance and really on that side of things say, like, just start to act with the intention of the AI Act and with ethics in mind. And I think for me, some of the biggest things that are going to be broad brush will be AI literacy requirements, which we can all get ahead of, and explainability, which is a lot harder with third-party tools. But the explainability is the one where I would say the more you use it, and pause and ask questions and be critical about what you see, the more equipped you'll be down the line to say, I think there's a risk here. There was a team in Meta, and it's funny thinking about this, like, probably, I don't know how many, 5 years later, whose whole job was to explain the AI ads, because there was such a black box, the amount of models sitting on top of each other, that the people building them had lost sight of what was happening under the hood. So they ultimately had to hire a team of data scientists to retroactively describe what was happening. I think there's going to be a lot of jobs like that post AI Act, where it's going to be about understanding, explainability, being able to communicate it to customers, being able to add in post hoc processing of what you know is wrong or is high risk. So I actually think the more we learn in this period, the more effectively we'll actually be able to address the Act.
That's great. And I'm a bit of a rebel, but I also love process and policy and compliance. I think building a robust AI policy as well gives people comfort, and you've also got those guardrails, haven't you, to focus kind of the attentions. But that'd be a brilliant point to raise, Lou. Absolutely. And I also wanted to respond to Tim's as well, but we're 1 minute past 3. You know that I'm a stickler for sticking to the time frames that we have allocated. So yeah, Kate, that was absolutely brilliant. Really engaging, really insightful, and thank you so much. Can people reach out to you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. Add me on LinkedIn, send me a DM if anybody would like to chat about the course or anything, and I share a lot of content on AI on LinkedIn as well.